to know about octopuses?
I know they got tentacles. I know they have some strong suckers.
Yeah.
I love Octopuses.
They have like 8 arms. Yeah.
They are arms. So it's a great question. There's a difference between a tentacle and an arm. An arm is going to, why we call these arms and not tentacles. The tentacle actually has the ability to gather food. That's what their main job is. Arms are not appendages necessarily used for food collection. Most of our octopuses will do different behaviors with their arms in order to maybe trap food or it's part of their hunting strategy, but they're using those appendages specifically to gather food. Their appendages are used for sensory purposes and for locomotion and that kind of thing. So, hi, my name is Apryl Reed. I am one of the youth engagement mentors here at the Seattle Aquarium. I have been here at the Seattle Aquarium in several different capacities for the last 2 years. And prior to that, I worked in North Carolina at the aquarium on the coast there.
Have you always loved octopuses?
Yeah, I would say I have always had a profound respect for them since I was, little, and learning about them and understanding what kind of behaviors they exhibit and where they live and kind of what they do. So I always had a profound respect and admiration for them. Did not fall in love with them until I was able to work with them. In fact, I am an eater of all seafood. I have come to terms with the fact that that's okay. Working at an aquarium, you form a lot of relationships with sea critters, and that has not changed since working in the aquarium setting, with one exception, and that is octopus. I no longer eat octopus, and there is a reason for that. It's just something that I formed such a love of these animals after working with them that it's no longer on my menu.
How would you describe the octopuses that the aquarium currently is caring for?
Yeah, so I can just highlight our 2 GPOs, our giant Pacific octopuses. So we have currently Bailey. She is she's about a 1.5-year-old female giant Pacific octopus. She is very spunky and has a lot of personality. She always has since the minute we put her in the exhibit space. She is very, very keen on guests and visitor interaction. So that's Bailey, and then we also have CJ, who is a male GPO. He's a little bit more relaxed and demure on exhibit, but he definitely has his own very strict personality. We formed a special bond with these animals. It's easy to do that because they do actually show a little bit of that facial recognition with their handlers or with the folks that feed them or train them. And what's interesting is that for me, one very particular one comes into mind. Vincent, who was one of our more recent giant Pacific octopuses that we have on exhibit, he was somewhat of a shy octopus right off the bat, but then I don't know what it was. It was actually something that as I was working with him, this was at the time when I was still working as a marine science interpreter, so I was doing a lot of the feeding. I started to notice that he would wake up when I was around and follow me depending on what side of the exhibit space I was. So I started to notice that, and then of course you start to pay attention, and then I would start talking to him, which, sounds crazy, but that's what you do when you work with GPOs. And he and I ended up forming a little bit of a friendship bond where he would almost, in a way, it seemed like he was listening when I would talk to guests, invite them over, and have a whole conversation with them about Vincent. He would display the behaviors that I was talking about at the time. Sometimes you get that kind of attention, and you see that there's that cognitive activity coming from these animals, which provides you with that, feeling that, oh yeah, it seems like this individual has a specific personality, and they're a lot different. They're all very different.
What do you think is the best way to build a relationship with an octopus?
Yeah, feed them. They're animals. Most of us kind of work that way too, right? You get your food from somebody, they're sort of your best friend at that point. But also just showing them respect. Honestly, these animals have, especially the giant Pacific octopuses, I continue to highlight that species just because they tend to do a lot of work with enrichment. Here at the Seattle Aquarium, we do a lot of enrichment activities with our octopuses, providing them with stimulation through toys or changing their environment within the exhibit, and doing those sorts of things and encouraging that behavior and respecting that behavior. It really does build a little bit more of a relationship between, the life sciences staff or, our staff members and the animal itself, because they come to expect that high level of interaction with us.
What do you think are the most interesting behaviors or tendencies of octopuses?
Oh, so many. Here, if we're going to make it something about our octopuses here at the Seattle Aquarium, they tend to take their feeding stick after you're done with the feed. And I think that is one of the most unusual. When I first started working here and I saw that first octopus keep the feeding stick that we use, we actually use a stick and put their fish or shrimp or whatever it is that they're eating. They tend to keep the stick as well after the food has been removed. And that has always been a fascinating thing to me. And they play with it. A lot of times they'll go to sleep with it. It becomes something that they just want to hold on to, and they like to taste it, and it's all textured, so they like to feel it with their arms and their suction cups. So that has, if we're talking about our Seattle Aquarium octopuses, that has always been a very, very peculiar tendency that I would like to pay attention to. So I would say if we're talking on the level of being a predator, this animal can change color, can change form, they can blend their bodies in certain ways to make them mimic other animals and look like other animals, or even something, like a rock structure or coral. Within a couple of seconds can be a completely different color or completely different shape, with their skin looking completely different than it did just a few seconds before. So for survival in the wild, these animals are going to be using those cognitive abilities to adapt to any environment, marine environment that they're in. I mean, they're working things out all the time of how to find food. If there's food shortages, where to go to end up, finding that food, how to get into certain animals to get to the food on the inside. Some of them will, out in the wild, will leave the water to essentially catch a crab or something of that nature, but they are capable of adapting, coming out of water, and using their cognitive abilities, but also their bodies to, in essence, capture food and continue to survive. Those neurological tendencies towards being able to solve puzzles and figure things out really helps to increase their food supply, really. One of their main cuisine, one of their main food sources are bivalves, right? So clams, oysters, mussels, those animals that really, really need a hard outer shell in order to grow and develop. And when you're talking about ocean acidification, climate change and ocean acidification, that process within the water that when we're taking on extra CO2, that rampant CO2 in the atmosphere, is changing the chemistry and the pH of the water. So it could absolutely have an impact over time on the availability of this animal in the wild.
Okay, and do you have any reasons that you think that people viewing our documentary should care about octopuses?
They're an integral part of the food chain out there. They make up an ecosystem, a food web within our marine environment that would heavily negatively impact that food web if they disappeared. So they are part of that. So yeah, I think that absolutely you should care. Plus, if you don't know about giant Pacific octopuses in general, come to the aquarium. I promise you, you will fall in love with them immediately. And if you don't, come see me and I'll help you out with that.